Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Mining Insight, where we bring to you real conversations with leaders shaping our industry and country. Today, we touch on a sensitive topic impacting not only the mining industry, but the entire country. What happens when you've pursued a highly demanded field like engineering, coupled with further qualifications like masters, but still cannot secure a job or good business? That's the reality of our guest today. But before we go right in, please remember to like, subscribe, and financially support the channel by clicking on the Super Thanks button, helping us bring you quality content. Let's meet our guest. Wesley Madia is a mining engineer with a master's degree from the University of Pretoria and a qualified project manager who made the bold decision to leave corporate and pursue entrepreneurship. But when COVID-19 hit, his business dreams were derailed, leaving him navigating the harsh reality of unemployment in a sector he once thrived in. As a sustainable mining enthusiast, Wesley understands both the promise and the problems plaguing our industry. Today, he's here to share his story, the barriers keeping talented young professionals out, the red tape strangling mining entrepreneurship, and what it takes to survive when the industry you love has no room for you. This is Wesley's Truth. Wesley, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Matlano, for having me.
Sure. Maybe let's start with your personal background, your upbringing, and really how you got yourself into the industry.
Well, I think before I start, let me also just acknowledge the platform.
Sure.
I think it's really an honor to be here and to be invited by you, and also sharing the same seat as you, and having sat where other people, industry leaders such as your Ian Chauke, your Nombasa have said. I think this is really a remarkable moment for me. So thank you for that. And just to also get into your question.
Yeah.
So mining for me, it's one of those things that I feel that came in a form of inheritance.
Yeah.
My dad is a miner, still is. He's been in the industry for about 35 years now.
Sure.
So we come from the Secunda area. That's our second home, but that's not where the cows are. The cows are somewhere else.
Yes.
But yeah, we come from Secunda. So obviously being around that area, you're sort of channeled towards your choice of career.
Yeah.
So we grew up around that area, and that's how I got introduced to mining. And as a firstborn child, you look up to your father, you see him going to work, speaking about work, then you get invested in curious about what does this person do, and so I chose mining because of that influence from my dad.
Sure.
And yeah, I got into mining, studied at the University of Pretoria, completed in 2018 my undergrad, then went to join Company X. I don't know if I should say the company.
That's okay, you can.
Yeah. So I joined Sasol Mining
Sure.
immediately after graduating in 2018. Started my graduate program in 2019.
Yeah.
Then they relapsed for 3 years. Then from there, I was appointed as a shift boss in one of the sections there at Sasol, and that's when my journey started. That's when everything started.
Sure. Maybe let's even latch on that. You were, building your career there, and you decided to resign as a shift boss that time. Why?
Well, I think it goes way back into when I was growing up. I come from a very, my dad was, at the time, he was a general worker. So obviously, you develop a sense of comparing as a child. Why is my family not the same as other families? I had that problem growing up.
Sure.
So in addition to the influence he was having on me looking up to him, but I didn't like the kind of job that he was doing.
Sure.
I asked myself, how can this person be away from home the whole day, but we can't afford X, Y, and Z? So I started being invested in entrepreneurship. I think I sold bottles at the age of 8. I was selling bottles just to get money to go to school, and that grew the entrepreneurial muscle in me.
Sure.
Since then, I found myself selling stuff at school. I've always been that child, right into university. So I think why did I resign, to answer your question? From university, I think around 2016, I started a business, soundstage and lighting business. that immediately after graduating, I invested a bulk of my money that I was earning into that business. So it grew so much around 2018, 2018, 2019, 2021. It grew so much that we were averaging about 3 to 4 million a year. So you can imagine, you are comparing now a graduate program, you are getting X amount with this business that is giving you so much, demanding your time. Then I had to make a choice to say, what do I go into now? But that stemmed from the fact that it was just after COVID.
Sure.
So the business was experiencing a lot of problems, and I was in it with my brother, and he decided to leave after seeing that COVID has affected us so much.
Sure.
And being the founder and the financial muscle of the business, I was confronted with the choice of, do I leave my workers and all the financial, all the contracts that we have with our clients, just to elapse, and we're probably going to get into trouble, or do I now pursue my career? So I had to make the difficult choice to say, let me put my career on hold and pursue the business in order to save the business. So that's what led into my resignation.
Sure.
From Sasol. Yes.
Look, you are now an engineer. You also hold a master's degree from one of the top universities in South Africa. I think with those credentials, an expectation is you're supposed to be sought out by organizations. But I mean, with you sit unemployed with these credentials. How did you get there where you are just unemployed?
Well, I think after leaving, Sasol, I got exposed to the world of business, and I developed my entrepreneurial muscle even further, to a point where now I started seeing myself differently than how I used to see myself. I started seeing myself as a problem solver, a person who has a responsibility in society in order to, identify issues that trouble our communities and try to come up with ways that can actually solve those problems in a commercial way, of course, also because I also need to survive at the same time. So that's how I found myself being unemployed. And also, look, one might say there are no opportunities and all that, but, we need to start looking at being unemployed, not placing negative connotations to it. Being unemployed can be an opportunity for one to explore other avenues.
Sure.
We have an unemployment problem in the country, of course. It means now this is a call for more entrepreneurs to enter the space, and more specifically people who have gotten the privilege to go and get a higher form of learning. You have a peculiar way of thinking, so you are a problem solver. So yes, you did mention that I'm an engineer, but I think of myself more as a problem solver than an engineer. Maybe in an engineering sense, but that's how I see myself. So being unemployed currently, it's just, I wouldn't say it's out of choice. It's not out of choice. I am seeking employment because it gets tough also, the road of entrepreneurship. But, coming from Sasol and following the production route, I don't think I still want to go into that route. So, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about what that does to you as an individual. I mean, being unemployed impacts you personally.
It does.
Particularly because we live in a society that places value on an individual based on what they're doing in the world, their financial muscle. And you honestly even do compare yourselves with where you are financially and career-wise and where your peers are.
Yes.
What has this done to you personally?
You see, I think the noise, I always speak of the noise. There's what you want and the noise. That's the noise. It's very loud.
Yeah.
It's very loud. And you go through a cycle. First you resign, you're excited, like, okay, now I'm going to be free. I own my time. I've got this. 6 months in, you're like, okay, now I'm running out of money. A year in, you start seeing friends buying cars, getting married and all that, and family asking you what's wrong. They start wanting to send you to so and so that does this and that. So it's you get to a point where you reject yourself. You question your abilities. You start thinking back, did I take the right choice? Do I even deserve to be called an engineer and all that? But it has killed me internally, honestly, such that even being in public spaces was a problem. And it's you reject yourself. That's what I would say. You reject yourself a lot. it affects you so much. And also not only in terms of personally, but also remember, now I have a daughter. I have a 2-year-old daughter. You start struggling to just provide the essentials for her. You understand? So that creates a lot of frustration as well. So you can imagine now, it's time for your daughter to attend a crash or this and that, but you cannot manage, and so those are the things that you go to. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's about, how do you see it? How do you respond to whatever adversity that you're facing?
Yeah, let's talk about some of the trends we're actually seeing in the industry where you get people with less experience leaving the industry, wanting to pursue business. Would you perceive that as uncalculated, impatient, or perhaps as ambition? How do you describe the trend that we see? Because a lot of people with less experience are leaving to pursue business.
Well, pursuing business can be a function of several variables. One could be due to frustration. Some people leave because they are frustrated, and my interpretation of that is, most of the time, if you're frustrated, chances are you haven't laid out a good plan or a long-term plan as to how you're going to survive 4 or 5 years or 10 years down the line. So that might be a problem. That's a problem. But also, people can pursue or leave the industry to pursue business because, similar to my case, where they see problems in the society or problems even within the industry itself, to say, for me to be able to address such an issue, I can go out and maybe start my own organization with a couple of people that I know. And look, with entrepreneurship, it is not an issue of, I don't see it as you being ready. You can, if you think of the biggest companies, Google, you can name them, TikTok and all that, those Snapchat, most of those companies were formed by graduates, if you think about it. So they didn't have to invest 10x number of years for them to be able to say, now we're ready to go out. So there's nothing wrong with going out of the industry, as long as it is well calculated, as long as, there's a long-term vision in place, and, there's a plan, a very detailed plan in place. There's nothing wrong. But also, the industry frustrates people a lot. It frustrates a lot of people. And some might argue that, you have to go through a phase of hardship for you to develop strength. For you to
You sound like you don't agree.
No, I do. I honestly feel like there's no pain. There's no gain without pain.
Sure.
But pain is what can I say? It's painful.
Sure.
Pain is painful. Yeah. So I feel there's a better way that things can be done. There's a better way that a person can build value, especially in the age that we're living in. We live in the age of AI. You understand? Such that now we have everything at the tip at our fingertips. So what a person needs to render or to be of value it's no longer the same as what a person in the 1970s needed. You understand? So I think we also need to change the thinking to say now, but guys, how is it that we can deliver value or be competent without having to go through that? I don't have to spend 12 hours underground for me to be a miner.
Look, we're not set up like that, but yeah.
You see, so that's how I see things.
For sure. Yeah. Look, if you look at businesses, particularly in mining, they are mostly owned and run by individuals who've been in the industry for a very long time. They've built networks. They've built their technical expertise. And most of these companies are successful. And definitely there is those who start very young, venture out and are successful, but those are a handful. Would you say perhaps that that's not somewhat currently the formula to being successful in business, building the networks, building the technical expertise, then venture out, looking at what we see now, because the reality is a lot of them are run by people who ran mines.
That's true. That's true. How I think of business, I think of it in terms of I don't know if it's Isaac Newton or Einstein, but I think it's Einstein,
Sure.
that said energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can only be transformed from one form to another.
Yeah.
So if you think of a business, you think of it in a form of a basket that has to have things being put inside, right? Or think of it in terms of water. You need three things. You need knowledge, one, which is where the competency comes in,
Sure.
right? The years of experience and all that. You need money, right? And you need time. So it's a formula. It's three things that you need in business. And you can start with any one of the three, right? So the people who have been in industry, who have built the networks, the competency, the confidence and all that, basically they're in pursuit of all these three things. But it doesn't mean a person who's early on in their career cannot get these three things.
Sure.
You get what I mean? So maybe also we can also talk to how the industry is set up. The industry could be set up in such that there are too many red tapes. But it doesn't mean that when there is a hurdle that one has to cross over, it's impossible to cross. It's possible. It might take you quite longer than other people, but it's possible. So in my personal opinion, I'm really not for spending time in the industry working and only then do you form a business, because we have a generation that is able to see things that maybe the older generation does not see. And sometimes you see issues while you are employed, and it's a problem that you can solve by being out, having time. You need to have access to time, because once you are employed, now your time, you are sharing it with your employer, right? You need to have money. If you have the money, you have the time, you have the knowledge, then and knowledge can always be sourced, by the way, and as a businessman, don't see yourself as a person who's the doer of things. You need your duty is to have a vision.
Sure.
My vision is this. If you want to develop a product, I want the product to be in this way. You can always get so and so to come and really help you with that. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did, absolutely. And I'm actually thinking now and reflecting on where you are.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking there's quite a lot of people who are so passionate about business, but somehow it's not working. And the work environment seemingly what they don't want. And your question is, how do we then fix that part?
Yeah, it's very difficult, because now there's also the politics of the stomach. That's what they call it. So obviously it's a balance of the two. You have to have some form of buffer for you to be able to say, I'm confident I'm gonna do this. Or you have to be a Wesley now and have that heart of saying, you know what, I don't care, I'm just gonna go into this.
I'm gonna make it work.
I'm gonna make it work somehow. So yeah, it's a finding that balance. It's quite hard. And I'll also talk to your choice of a partner. Sometimes you can have a partner that can support you. Like myself, I have a partner that is very supportive of my journey. That's why I'm able to take the decisions that I take. I'm able to have that buffer to say, you know what, while I'm unemployed, while this and this is not working, at least my partner is able to sort out the politics of the stomach. You see, I think the main challenge is that, and also, with graduates, new entry people into the industry, they quickly rush into getting accessories instead of thinking what's going to happen 10 years from now, will or creating a buffer for themselves, so that they have that flexibility. Financial freedom is not wealth as in, now I have so much money to spend on anything. Financial freedom is freedom to choose how you spend your time, what you want to do with your time. That's financial freedom. Yeah.
Look, you did mention issues around frustration, and that obviously speaks a lot in whether or not we can retain young people, particularly this generation. The reality is the mining industry is literally leading in a different dispensation. We are multi-generational in the people that we lead in the workforce. You've got the older, loyal people who are actually retiring, and you've got the new value-based young people that are in the industry. And I'm not sure if we've embraced that part of the workforce that we currently have. What have you seen? Are we really embracing this generation, and perhaps the risks of not leading this ambitious people that are now sitting in the industry?
That's an interesting one. When I'll speak based on my personal experience. There's a lot of conflict between the two groups of people.
Sure.
And you can imagine, and it's granted. We have one generation, totally different set of principles, values, and another generation. We are more digital and all that. To get these two to work together, it's. I don't think the industry has embraced that. And also, the sad reality is the phasing out of a certain way of thinking, because an engineer in the 70s compared to an engineer now, their relationship with problem solving is different. So such that what does the current trends, the way the world is moving, what type of person, what type of engineer does it require? A person in the 70s, are they still relevant now? Not necessarily, because now AI will give you everything. So instead of me having to crack my head about something, I just need to understand where to get the information. Then I easily have access to it. So the industry hasn't embraced that. Hence, you see, even our technology adoption is quite slow compared to other, first world countries such as Australia. Australia, they are automating everything right now. They are remote mining. But we have, as a country, as an industry, we haven't embraced that yet. We're doing it, but we are not yet there. But what does that talk to? It talks to the thinking. Is the thinking right? Are we investing on the people that, it's natural to them to touch a tablet and just play around with it? I mean, that's the generation that is going to lead us into automation.
Sure.
So our ability to be able to integrate the older generation that gives the people the fundamentals of the industry, the fundamentals of how things are done. But in addition to that, let's get this generation that is more applicable, applying and implementing, because this is an implementing generation.
Well, what would it take to retain someone like you who's ambitious? Because we've got a lot of those people. But I do think we've got to find a way, because it's not just you. There's quite a lot of people who are value-based, people who are wanting to add value, who are wanting to contribute. But how do we retain you? What would it take for you to go back?
Well, look, I haven't left. I haven't left Mahlomane.
For sure.
I'm still here. I haven't left the industry. I am still looking for employment here and there.
For sure.
But I'll talk about, my comparison between operations and consulting, because I had the opportunity of going into consulting. And I've seen mining consulting is much more concerned with, when we speak engineering, we speak engineering. We're actually engineering things. You can actually see the value that you're adding. And also you get to harness your abilities. You don't question whether or not you are intelligent. It's clear that,
Careful. Consider me.
No. Sure. I'm not saying the people who are on operations are not,
I get it, 100%.
They are, but it depends also on how you process information. Some people strive more with being in a small team and actually working on let's get this thing to work instead of guys, let's go in and so for me, I think allow a person to express themselves and allow them to actually utilize that part of their brain that ticks, because you get to get out of that person the best value. But now if you get a Lamborghini to do drag racing, you are getting a very good car, but you're just putting it in the wrong place, and that's an issue. You find a lot of people feeling that I'm not good enough, I am not this enough. But even that person, look at your training. What did university prepare you for? University will tell you that there's a centrifugal pump or fan, whatever. At the mine, they'll tell you, take this pump and put it inside that water. You understand? So it's a problem, because when I see a pump, I see a centrifugal pump, I see all these things, and they tell you get there, they tell you it's a combi pump. Okay, fine, I get it, it's a combi pump, but You understand? So I don't know. I think the responsibility lies with the individual themselves. Get to know yourself enough so that you make a good choice of the type of work that resonates very well with you and that makes that part of your brain that, yeah.
But to think of it, the fairness of building the industry, then it takes somebody like you who knows what is required now to enjoy the process and create something different for the generations to come. Because it's almost like you're expecting somebody who's been in the industry traditionally to accommodate a generation that they just struggle to even understand. Shouldn't we then focus on retaining the Tlogis now so that they implement the changes that fits the generation so we build our industry? Why do we then still want to leave an industry we see it's a bit traditional and it's sort of, we are phasing quite a lot of things out and we choose to stay out?
Yeah, well, look, we might see it as an industry problem, but if you look at it holistically, even as a country, you know, we are. They speak about African time. We are always left behind somehow. You understand, and that can talk to our history also as Black people. You know, we just need to restore that confidence back in Black people. Specifically, I'm going to speak about Black people specifically. We need to restore that confidence back so that we feel that we are entitled. We deserve the same thing that the Chinese deserve, the same thing that the Europeans deserve. Then like that will feed also into our industries now to say, you know, when we have a Tlogis there, we know that Tlogis is confident, and as a person who has been in the industry for long enough, the transfer of knowledge and the investing of a particular way of thinking into an upcoming generation is something that person is passionate about. You understand? So I think that will you know lead us in the right direction, and critical to the retention of skill and experience is the issue of mentorship. I've mentioned knowledge transfer. We have a serious problem of mentorship in especially in mining, because the mentor and mentee relationships that you see are not that much fruitful. You know, the mentees, they use mentors to secure the next position, which is not what's supposed to happen. That shouldn't happen. Even the mentors, they use the mentees as an opportunity to I guess build their profile, to visibility and all that, and that's a problem. You know, it should speak to a bigger problem. The objective should be bigger than that. So part of retention of skill is, let's get the right systems in place in terms of mentorship, and let's change the thinking of, you know, the those who are early on in their careers.
For sure. One of the big values of the generation we've got now is engagement. And the reality is, with what we probably have both seen, is that being vocal about unspoken truths can be very career limiting. But equally, the unspoken truths can be limiting to the growth and development of the industry itself. That's why some conversations are hard to have. You want to count your words, right?
Yes.
How do we balance the two? Because it's either you limit your career or will limit the industry. How do we balance the two? And would you say perhaps you are where you are because you're quite candid?
Yes, actually, you know, interesting story. I have a nickname that I was given at my time at Sasol. I was given a name Raymond. Apparently, back in the days, there used to be a gentleman by the name of Raymond. that was very I'd say repulsive or cynical. Questions everything, but from maybe a you know a not humble state, very arrogant, you know, position. So they gave me that name because I used to be that graduate that would question it during the graduate program. You know, upon starting the graduate program, I took the program and actually studied it. I looked at it. Okay, these are my milestones. This is what needs to happen. And I was able to question a manager to say, but you want me to do this, right? But the whole point of this graduate program is such that we experience different departments so that we can, at the end of the graduate program, we're able to make a choice to say, this is the line that I'm going to follow. Managers don't like that. It's a very uncomfortable thing especially to be told by a graduate. Hence, I was given that name. But just to answer your question, I was just giving you context of some of the difficult conversations one can have. We the difficult conversations we need to have them. And I always encourage the youth to be bold, but responsible as well. You need to be bold and responsible. And yes, the industry, you leave a lot of impressions wherever you go. It's highly critical to always guard that, but do not be afraid to, voice out what you feel that is necessary, and it speaks to a higher cause other than only self-interests. It's highly crucial, and failure to have those conversations at all levels, whether junior or senior level. Failure to have those conversations will lead us into, an era where we are unable to solve or actually deal with the substance of our problems. You understand? So that's the issue. And funny enough, there was one comment that was given by someone. He said, inkinga yakho is that uneqiniso kakhulu. Ukhuluma iqiniso kakhulu. So it was a mind of a CEO of mine while I was a shift boss. So we used to do these presentations. So I would just go there and just tell the truth, tell the managers the truth. The section is flooded. Why we don't have pumps? Why do you not have pumps? There's always those 5 whys. I would answer, we don't have pumps, this and this happened, right? And my man would say, no, the problem is that ukhuluma iqiniso kakhulu. And I found that to be a problem to say, but we need to have these conversations. For sure. On my last point, when you look at there's something called the Deming cycle. The P is PDS, PDCS, plan, do, check, and act. So in any process, you need to follow a plan. You need to plan, follow the plan, then check if the plan is working. If the plan is not working, then you revisit it and you correct it, you action it, right? So part of having the difficult conversations is also, it's part of the check. We are checking if things are working. Then with time, we'll eventually get to a point where we are able to see sustainability in whatever we are doing.
For sure.
Yeah.
Look, Wesley, we've got regulatory bodies that truly hold the industry together. How can our regulatory bodies, and particularly the Department of Minerals, improve its systems and functions to better support the industry? Where would you say the gaps are, and how do we close those?
Well, when you think first, let's go back to what an industry is. Mining specifically, mining industry. An industry is a composition of a lot of role players, a lot of stakeholders. We have voluntary bodies, we have bargaining bodies, voluntary associations. We have public sector, we have private sector, which are the companies, the firms, and all that. And part of the public sector being the government, or the regulatory bodies being the government, they have a duty. And as an industry, we have a duty as well to say we need to move the industry in this direction. But critical to that is the regulatory bodies, to be specific, those that are responsible for training and development, because that's what I've went and studied and looked at the trends and what's happening. The DMR specifically is responsible for that. The inspectorate of the Commission of Examiners for MMC or MO, whatever, and all those other qualifications. I think the challenge is on, do we have systems that support a seamless, equitable, and fair admission process? I'll speak about the MMC. If you can go and conduct a survey and ask the number of people who have struggled with admission of MMC, mine managers certificate of competency. Sure. There are a lot, and there's a lot of frustration around unspoken truths. By the way, what you've just highlighted now, sure. People are afraid to go out and say, "But DMR, why is it that we are unable to get a system that we can be able to get the applications to be processed quicker? We can be able to have a target, as a department, that everyone can see that this is where the department is moving as far as the MMC is concerned. Failure rate, the previous results were not so impressive, but who accounts? We need to come back and look at, why is the failure rate so bad? If you think of PMI, the Project Management Institute, they have a very excellent admission process. And I wondered, after taking on that admission process and being admitted to their institution, to say, but why can't DMR implement something like this? They are also concerned about fraudulent acts and fraud of documents and everything, but they are able to find means to find that or trigger that. So we cannot just sit on the fact that let's stay on a paper process, and we're afraid of fraud and all that. No. We need to adapt to what's happening. The processing needs to be quicker. It needs to be fair. It needs to be transparent. So I think what can be improved with the DMR is, let's do what we've done with mining permits, mining licensing. That system that I don't know what it is. The cadet system. What do they call it? Yeah. So that system, it has shown that if you really develop a system that seeks to, involve everyone, all the stakeholders, and such that there's transparency, then we are able to get to the results quicker. We have a duty to ensure that the industry is equipped with people who are competent, enough mine managers, enough mine overseers. But if you have a lot of mine managers, potential leaders who are sitting unable to get the ticket because now, the process is frustrating. It's a problem. But transparency, I'm advocating for transparency. Let's develop a system that is transparent, fair, and equitable.
Sure. What's next for Wesley? And perhaps, how do you see the industry playing out in the next few years?
Well, look, the industry is I see. I'm very optimistic, honestly, about the industry. I love my industry. I love mining, and I like where it's going. And there are a lot of leaders as well who are driving, positive things and stuff. And with the emergence of the rare earth, and we'll see a shift. Of course, we do have challenges. We have a lot of big giants leaving and all that, but we're also opening a lot of mines. Is it Ivanhoe? Ivanhoe, yeah, Ivanhoe. We see mines opening up, so that shows that there's still a little bit of positivity in the industry. And for me, what's big, what's next for me, Wesley is going to be in mining.
Sure.
He's going to be a mining entrepreneur.
Sure.
I'm not an engineer. I'm a mining entrepreneur. So I want to get into the industry and really make an impact. I was looking more into post mining activities, mine rehabilitation, mine closure. We have a lot of, as I've mentioned, a lot of giants leaving. But what happens to what they're leaving behind?
Sure.
I mean, this is our country that we love so much, and we have a duty to say that what happens after these guys leave, as the citizens, let's get into that space and ensure that we build sustainability. Now we diversify mining so that we intersect mining with farming, for instance. The land that is left behind, what happens to it? Sure. Let's rehabilitate it and start, building an industry that intersects with other industries as well. So that's what's next for Wesley, and that's what I'm looking into.
Sure. Look, Wesley, thank you so much for sharing your journey and insight, and I truly wish you the best in your career.
Thank you so much, Mhlongo. Appreciate it.
The complex challenges of unemployment can be very devastating, but equally give opportunities to question and improve our systems. I hope this episode has inspired you to challenge the status quo and be intentional about building our industry in this complex economic landscape. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye and God bless.